Jack Smith has asked the Supreme Court to get involved preemptively in one of the cases against Donald Trump. And the Supreme Court responding here pretty quickly. Put this up on the screen. I'm going to give you all of the details momentarily. Supreme Court has agreed to consider Jack Smith's petition for it to establish whether Donald Trump is immune from prosecution. Trump has until 4 on December 20th to respond. Put the next piece up on the screen that gives the backstory here. So special counsel Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court on Monday to swiftly decide whether former President Donald Trump is absolutely immune from federal prosecution for crimes allegedly committed while he was in office. This has to do with the election interference case, not the documents case. One of the arguments that the Trump team has been making is, listen, these were things that were done when he was president of the United States, and we believe that means that he's immune. Jack Smith is arguing, listen, we need to expedite this process. We need to circumvent, we're going to skip the appeals level. We want the Supreme Court to decide this right now so that we can expedite this trial and get some sort of a resolution in a timely fashion, before we're in the height of the presidential election season and before there's a possibility of Donald Trump getting elected. So Saagar, incredibly important, obviously, in terms of the campaign and in terms of the timeline, because one of the biggest questions with all of these cases hasn't been so much, will Trump be found guilty, but when will the trials unfold? When will there be a possibility of some sort of conviction? Is it going to conflict with the height of presidential campaigning? Is it going to occur after November when Trump can just, on the federal charges, get his DOJ to drop the charges, et cetera? So a major move by Jack Smith here, which is unusual but not unprecedented, to jump up to the Supreme Court and try to get them to expedite what's happening here.
I actually think this is a good thing. And the reason why is it raises these mega questions. And this is something, if people go watch our initial coverage on all of this, some of my ITs, I was like, there are going to be a crazy amount of Supreme Court cases around presidential immunity, because the main question at hand before the court is around the immunity provisions of the president as previously established in DOJ policy and in some existing case law. But none of it has ever happened before where a president is actually being put on trial for deeds that allegedly occurred while he was the president of the United States. And not only that, he was the outgoing president of the United States. Actually, his successor had already been certified by the Congress, which raises just all kinds of crazy questions around presidential power, about what it actually means. The immunity claim itself is that Trump has said not only that he denies the truth of any allegations in here, but that all of the underlying charges against him occurred during his sitting presidency, which shields him from any prosecution, the initial immunity grounds. So the judge in the case has already rejected it, but this is like a Democratic appointed judge. I mean, even put that aside, it's not the way that this gets litigated. It is why it was immediately escalated and accepted now by the Supreme Court. Then it raises the even crazier political questions about Trump's got 3 people who he appointed to the bench. So are they going to rule against him? They have had no problem doing that previously, but this also falls into big questions that go beyond Trump, because people like Justice Alito and others, Brett Kavanaugh as well, are big defenders of the idea of the supreme executive and executive power. This is something that they've ruled about previously. Justice Thomas, probably a little bit more libertarian, maybe swing there as well. Obviously, I know all the liberals will go on there. Justice Roberts as well, we don't actually know, because he's also a big defender of kind of the unitary executive model and what that looks like for presidential power. So there's actually some major constitutional questions that are at play before the court.
So just to make it really clear to people in case it's not, what the Trump team is arguing is basically that if you're president of the United States, you can do anything, you can break any law, and you have complete and total immunity forever. The analysis that Jack Smith is offering here is that you can't be charged while you are president, but if you commit crimes during your tenure in office, then after you are out of the presidency, you can be charged and you can be found guilty for crimes that you committed while you were president. The legal analyses that I saw, for what it's worth, seem to indicate that they thought it was more likely that Jack Smith would prevail on this question, and that, Trump's assertion that, listen, you're immune for absolutely anything you do, even if it's on the periphery of your powers as president of the United States, you're good to go for the rest of your life, that was likely to be rejected. The bigger question, again, was the timeline. Will the Supreme Court take this up when this is, would be highly unusual for them to do so? Or are they going to let the appeals process play out and go through the normal sort of chain of command here in terms of the U.S. judiciary, which of course would take a much longer period of time? And this is the Trump team's strategy. Their strategy is to delay as much as they possibly can to try to push things out to ideally after the election has already happened. And so Jack Smith coming in here to try to, short circuit that potential direction of their, of what they're doing here. Just a little bit of historical background. They write that the Supreme Court rarely moves with the speed that Smith is proposing here, but there is precedent for doing so in the 1974 case involving Richard Nixon and a subpoena for tape recordings issued during the Watergate investigation. The Supreme Court granted the government's request to resolve the dispute 1 week after it was filed and issued a decision less than 2 months later. I read another analysis that said this move of jumping over the appeals court and going straight to the U.S. Supreme Court has been very rare in history, but actually has been used more frequently. I believe the number was like 19 times over the past several years, so it's become a little bit more commonplace. And interesting that the Supreme Court has agreed very quickly to consider this. Yeah. So very noteworthy. This is probably, one of the biggest political stories in the country, hanging over whatever is going to happen in 2024. And really the timeline is kind of the key piece here. Also, another reminder of Trump's dominance in the Republican primary currently came yesterday in a new Des Moines Register poll. Put this up on the screen. Des Moines Register polls are considered, sort of like the best poll of Iowa and of potential caucus goers. They now find Donald Trump with a majority, an outright majority, 51%. In the state of Iowa. This is an incremental improvement from their last poll. They find DeSantis hanging on to the number 2 slot at 19%, Nikki Haley in third at 16%, Vivek is at 5%, Chris Christie at 4%. So that is where things stand today. And Saagar, one of the things that I took note of here is, first of all, Nikki Haley is struggling to grow beyond this point because a number of voters see her as like too moderate and sort of like too critical of Trump. The other thing I take note of is there's always been this theory of, we need to consolidate the Republican field as people drop out. Then a one Trump alternative could emerge. Guess who benefited most from people dropping out of the race?
What was his name?
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is benefiting the most as people drop out of the race because that analysis relies on a fantasy world in which, there's this majority of the Republican coalition looking for Trump alternatives. No, the people who are backing Tim Scott or others, apparently many of them, their second choice was Donald Trump. So here we are.
Also, what was really noteworthy to me is that 3/4 of the Republican fields, or Republican caucus goers, say that Trump can defeat Biden despite his legal challenges. And you know what? I think they're right. I actually think that they're 100% right. We had some of that polling that we covered yesterday, which showed that it would have a slight impact on the way that people voted. Look, nobody knows for sure until it actually happens. So, nobody can think about what will happen until it really does. But, you can presuppose it a little bit in terms of how would it impact your vote. And the vast majority of people, or at least independents and others, it's not going to have such a massive impact on your vote. I think that Biden is under so much. I think Biden is underwater in so many ways, more so than the legal problems, that it just dwarfs everything else. So, for example, Krystal, I was looking yesterday in the crosstabs of that Wall Street Journal poll. This was highlighted by Josh Kraushaar. If you ask people, did Biden's policies help you or hurt you? 54% say they hurt me. Only 20-some% say that they helped you.
Yeah.
If you ask them about Trump, it's actually flipped. It's not an overall majority, but it's the minority who say hurt, majority who say, or plurality who say helped. How can you overcome that? I mean, that's just like the ultimate test, especially when you've got this mirror image of these two candidates. I think Trump benefits the most from, I wouldn't call it rose-colored glass syndrome.
Yeah.
More just, he was president when it wasn't COVID. And post-COVID, shit's gone bad. And you've got high gas, you've got an international global crisis. Some of that he was responsible for in 2019, some of it he's not. Biden is definitely a casualty of the Federal Reserve and of COVID policy. Some of it is his own making in terms of vaccines and masks and all that other stuff that he decided to do in 2021. But nonetheless, Put the two times together, and Trump can ask the most basic question: would you rather live in 2019 or would you rather live today? And most people are going to say 2019. That's what the vast majority of people want to return to, inflation-wise, price-wise, life-wise. He's got a lot going for him from a structural advantage point of view.
Trump has never been in a stronger position to win in his previous two races than he is now. I mean, just try to put yourself back in the 2016 polling and in the 2020 polling. Remember, it had him down consistently by big numbers in some of these states. Now you got him up by double digits in Michigan, a state that wasn't all that close last time around. You cannot look at this landscape and think that it is anything but a catastrophe for Joe Biden. Now, what they're betting on is these court cases. They're betting on, Trump's disposition and people being reminded that this man is like a chaotic asshole. They're hoping that abortion continues to be a dominant force in politics. And what they would point to is, listen, a lot of the same analysis held in the, anticipation of the red wave in the last midterms. It didn't come through. People were they were very upset about the economy. They were not happy with Biden. They were not happy with his leadership. His approval rating was very low. And nevertheless, Democrats overcame historical norms in terms of midterm election. It was a very disappointing night for Republicans. They would also point to special elections that we've had where Democrats have been consistently outperforming what the polls have expected them to do. So that's what they would say. But I think, frankly, it's cope. I mean, you can't look at these economic numbers. You can't look at the head-to-head numbers and think that this is, that this is going well for the Biden team. And the other piece of this is, Biden is not capable of really campaigning. He's not campaigning. They really aren't even building out campaign operations in these states. Saw an article about that, about how they're way behind even just organizationally in terms of their campaign apparatus. He's not able to effectively debate. He's not able to effectively communicate. He's not able to effectively go out and do rallies and really persuade people that he's got the vigor for another 4 years and a plan and an agenda that they, may have some interest in. So I think they're in a terrible position. And when you add the third-party candidates into the mix, it just gets even more dire.
Yeah, check this out. Just some more I pulled up. Trump has double-digit leads on handling the economy, inflation, crime, securing the border, Ukraine war, Israel conflict. Biden has a double-digit lead on only one issue. Abortion. Well, I mean, if I were him, that's basically all I would be doing. And what Sean Trendy over at RCP highlights is that while Biden has a single-digit lead on healthcare and on Social Security, Democrats are supposed to have double-digit leads on those. So even in the places where he's beating Trump, supposedly he's not beating him by the margin that you're supposed to, just as a baseline generic Democrat in this race. So will abortion save his ass? Actually, maybe. That's one of those, the craziest part of American politics.
We covered that Texas case yesterday of the mother of two who was going through a process to try to get an abortion for the baby she's carrying now, who has a fatal defect, who is expected to only live days outside of the womb. Two updates for you on that. And again, this was in the state of Texas. Number one, she decided she's going to go out of state to have the abortion. And she's suffering massive health impacts also of carrying this pregnancy, which she would love to have a healthy baby girl. This isn't that she doesn't want children. It's that this particular baby is unable to live. So she decided to go out of state. At the same time, the Texas Supreme Court ruled against her. So it shows you how even in this extraordinary circumstance where she knows the baby is not going to survive, they would force her to carry it to term. And those are the sorts of stories that are unfolding and sorts of court cases that are unfolding day after day after day that Trump is going to have to grapple with, that he hasn't really had to grapple with. And it ties into a whole picture of him and the Republican Party as extremists, where it's like, okay, and this is the Democratic case. Well, you may not be happy with me on any number of issues, but these people are crazy. And so we can't put them back into power. And look, it has worked pretty well certainly in these midterm elections, in the special elections. It has been a pretty compelling case. So you can't just dismiss it totally out of hand.
Yep, I think you are absolutely right. So look, we'll cover everybody what happens. He's only got 8 days, Trump, to give his response to the Supreme Court. We theoretically could have a ruling by the end of the year, which is nuts. And that would be it. Boom, we're going to trial. So the days for trial look closer and closer, I think. Although if the Supreme Court rules the other way, that would be even crazier. So we really have no idea what's
No
gonna
idea,
happen.
but definitely something to keep
All right.
watching. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.